I think the most wonderful awareness that I have received from the Ascended Masters, apart from the profound mysteries of the Holy Grail, the mysteries themselves, is the observance of the outworking and the outplaying of those mysteries in the lives of the Ascended Masters, and specifically in the life of one whom I had the great joy and opportunity to observe, our own beloved Mark. The mystery of how the mysteries are applied and lived is the greatest mystery of all. And it is very unique in the life of everyone who ascends. The outline of the path is the same, but the way the individual actually personifies that path makes all the difference. When we can line up a number of lifetimes or many incarnations of a singular saint or master and study how they solve the problem of being, perfecting the science of the law on these 13 stages, we have within our hands and grasp a range of examples that come home very, very sharply at the moment of our own decision making. We remember what St. Francis did. We know what Francis Bacon did. We know what Confucius did. We know what Siddhartha did. And their example is like a pillar right there at the moment of our crossroads of a particular stage of the periods of becoming the Bodhisattva and the Buddha. We see the options exercised, and we know whether or not they were received as the acceptable offering by God, or they were the Cain offering and they were rejected. So this is how we measure by the universal Christ expressed in the many, how that law can be fulfilled by us legitimately. The reason being that no human standard can weigh or judge the heart or the actions of a life. Every rule has its exceptions, and every law of God has its interpretations on the many planes of being, and as pertains to individual karmic weight, the attainment or lack of it of the soul. Else why would it be that one is forgiven and one is not? One can be washed of their sins and set free. One can be healed and one not. One is taken and another is left. Two laborers laboring in the field. If everything were the same packaged conveyor belt rule, then why weren't they both taken? And why isn't everyone healed? And why do some children suffer such great burdens, and others seem to have a life almost of indulgence with everything they could ever want? This is the mystery of the law itself. So I thought in my heart, in presenting the mysteries of God to you this conference, that the best way to understand them, now that we've diagrammed them twice, once with Hiawatha and once with the cosmic clock, to take the lives of our favorite players in the great drama of Camelot and to show how they pass through the initiations of the Bodhisattva. So we begin at the beginning, at the very point of origin of Camelot, with none other than our most favorite Merlin. We examine his life beginning at the preliminary stage. In the white fire core of Alpha and Omega, the requirements of the mastery of those 5 secret rays. The point of the beginning of being the Bodhisattva, as you know, is desire. Merlin is known as a wonder child. In the 12th century, Geoffrey of Monmouth, in his major work, History of the Kings of Britain, depicts Merlin as a kind of wonder child who can see into the future. According to the traditional legend, he is half man and half demon. It is said his father was a demon and his mother a princess. But we must examine this a little further to understand what is truly meant. Robert de Boron takes his story a little bit further. He, the 13th century poet who wrote Merlin, says the devil had plotted to produce an antichrist with a demon for a father and a virgin for a mother. He says that the plan was thwarted when Merlin's virtuous mother tells her confessor she has conceived by a demon. He gives her holy water to drink and makes her take a vow of lifelong chastity. Thus Merlin is born without his father's evil ways, but retains superhuman powers, including the ability to see into the past and the future. The child Merlin is depicted as a prodigy. He could speak at birth. He dictates the history of the Holy Grail while still a baby. Now, in the preliminary stage, this comes under the mastery of the first secret ray. It is the period of purification. In this case, it is the purification of conception, the conception of the desire to be the Bodhisattva. Now we realize the one writing in the 13th century about Merlin is writing almost to justify history through the eyes of the Christian way. He cannot imagine a man of such powers except he be a demon. Even Jesus was accused of casting out devils by Beelzebub. And he said it cannot be so that the power of God could manifest by the power of Satan. What in truth is happening here is that the mother who typifies the Christian saint is wed to the ancient tradition of priesthood. She marries a Druid priest who has all of the powers of the ancient mysteries, the tradition of the Holy Grail, 2,000 years and more of the path of self-mastery of the Bodhisattvas. We perceive also that the very mystery of the Holy Grail itself antedates Christianity and is a conception that merely comes into what is always inevitably there, the vessel, the bowl, the sacred chalice. That grail and that chalice being the perfected matrix of the soul to receive the divine light. Those bowls were on the altar of the temples long before the Christian era. And so Merlin is one who does not quite fit in to the Christian way of thinking. And therefore, somehow to justify this extraordinary power, which is easily equal to or greater than that of Jesus, we have a Christian's eye view of this conception. Really, here, the word demon means God-man, deity in manifestation. Now, the demon becomes evil when that deity in manifestation robs the light and uses it to its own purposes in defiance of the Godhead. Then you have the demon. So you can see in ancient mythology that there is the first use of the term demon that is found. So this is the period of purification, which includes the performance of pious works, the community service, the dynamic decree. This was a part of both his father and his mother, a long stream of tradition. We can see that Merlin has this father and mother because he has merited it by his own previous embodiments. Therefore, they pass on to him the light that they carry in their genes. Their genes are the chalice of the transmittal to the boy Merlin of the contents of his causal body. And so it is true of all parents. And you can see what is called the preliminary stage, the period of preparation, being contained by the parents of a bodhisattva. desiring the bodhisattva not only in themselves, but in their offspring or their creation. And this is true of all the holy parents we have discussed in our lectures. Now we come to the second vow, the second of these 5 secret rays. It is the vow of Bodhi. This vow taken by Merlin prior to his incarnation, which is taken by all of you prior to your incarnation. It is the will to embody in this role. Merlin had a role to play in the great drama of Camelot. All the world is Camelot, and you also made the vow to embody and to play a role. We examine now the purity of the vow. What percentage of your being, my being, Merlin's being, was in agreement with this will to embody? Part of the reason we've all embodied is our karma. Some of us have not been too happy with that karma, or its mandates, or its assignments. And so one part of us wants to embody, and one part of us would rather not. Now, in the case of the Bodhisattva, in the case of Merlin, 100% of his being is committed to this embodiment, to be who he is. The power of that desire and that vow we can see in his very manifestation in his childhood. Now, if you would trace your life to the preconception point on this path, comparing it to Merlin, which you should, you are his Chela, you ought to see how you parallel his path. You would begin with your violet flame transmutation on the consuming by the violet flame of the Holy Spirit of momentums of your parents, which were a part of the preliminary stage before you actually appear in full force on the 12 o'clock line. So it is the purification of God desire in the father and the mother and your own soul, and going back to this life, you give the violet flame the calls to Astrea, dweller on the threshold, and so forth, to clear each of these points, of these stages, bringing into alignment your own past history, which is lawful. You can recreate history by the science of the spoken word and make those things right, which might not have been right at the moment. So the state of non-conflict must be present when the vow is taken. This makes and seals the vow, and it is the power of the vow to fulfill itself when there is non-conflict. Does everybody understand non-conflict? Jesus said, "Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." He acknowledged he had a will, he surrendered it. When he surrendered it, 100% of his energy was cast into the mold of the initiation that he would pass through. Now, the problem many times with the vow is very simple. A vow begins when your mother tells you to go and wash the dishes. You don't want to do it, you don't feel like doing it, and begrudgingly you go and do it. So you're not in line with the task, and half of you is begrudging it and half of you is doing it, and so the whole thing becomes misqualified, irritated, and perhaps you break some of them because you're feeling the intensity of the energy of your non-alignment. So if you do something because you think you should do it, but you don't really want to, you have conflict, and you don't have the momentum of your being poured into this vessel. You can look at each stage as a grail, and every time the grail appears to you, you must pour all of yourself into it. And if you're not ready to do that, you must take a step back and approach it with care, with confession, with transmutation, with an analysis of your psychology, so that when you do something, you do so with good cheer, goodwill, and wholeheartedness. And that includes taking embodiment. So you want to go back to that stage with a violet flame. You want to resolve conflicts, you have to start somewhere, so you might as well start with this life get it all lined up in divine order with your decrees. And when you have done so, and you have fulfilled its cycles to the best that you can see, God will come again and teach you and reveal other things from previous lives that you may not have seen before, that you can perfect by having this outline of the path. Merlin knew the ancient teachings handed down from the farthest past, from Lemuria and Atlantis, from Babylon and Egypt, from Greece and Rome, and summed it up in the sublime wisdom of Glastonbury. So writes Corinne Helene. Born of a human Christian mother and an archdemon, a druid high priest, father, his name was said to signify serpent babe, or wondrous one, for he possessed the wisdom of the serpent without its guile. He was a strange being in whom Celtic magic and Christian mysticism were blended. We understand that the meaning of the term serpent has to do with sacred fire and the raising of the kundalini from the base to the crown chakra. We understand that those beings called serpents, who have gained the bad name for themselves by falling from grace, were a band of angels who turned the mystery of the Grail and the sacred science of the word to black magic and control. The serpent and his seed have become an order of black magicians on the planet. The original meaning of serpent, however, goes to one who has the mastery of the serpent fire. Thus, we begin to understand out of what ancient tradition emerges Merlin, who himself was a priest of the sacred fire under the order of Lord Zadkiel when on Atlantis. Here in this lineage is clearly observable this vow of Bodhi, second of the secret rays. Geoffrey tells this story of the wonder child Merlin and Vortigern, king of Britain, who is being attacked by the Saxons. Vortigern and his court fled to Wales, where his magicians advised him to build a strong tower as a safe retreat. He chose a site for the tower in the mountains of Snowdonia, but his workmen's efforts to build it were frustrated because the foundations kept sinking into the ground. Vortigern's magicians told him that the only remedy was to find a boy who had no father, sacrifice him, and sprinkle the foundations with his blood. Now you can see that this rite of sacrifice and using the blood of the child is a perversion of the mystery of the Holy Grail of the body and blood of Christ. And Christian comprehension of the crucifixion itself is a perversion of the great mystery of the Holy Grail, of that initiation where one fastens oneself to the cosmic cross of white fire, to the very person of Almighty God, and gives one's momentum of Alpha and Omega, one's body and one's blood, one's spirit and one's matter, for the increase of light in those coming after. So here, the black magicians under Vortigern are pursuing a false rite, a satanic rite, and recommending it. These rites are pursued in South America. You cannot build a building unless you take the fetus of a ewe or a lamb and place it at the very cornerstone of that building, which means you have to kill the mother. And this is done every time a building is built. And it's that ancient blood sacrifice which has nothing to do with the mystery of the forgiveness of sin or the overcoming of black magic. So, what they did, men were sent to scour the country for a boy with no father, and one was found at Carmarthen. His name was Merlin, and he was the grandson of the king of Dyfed. No mortal man had sired him, according to this legend. Well, this concept of not being sired by a mortal is actually the true mystery of the conception of Jesus Christ by the Holy Spirit carried in the Holy Grail of a living individual who had the initiation and the God mastery of that office of the Holy Spirit namely beloved Joseph. So here we find that the myth goes back that in order to have holiness, one must not be sired by a mortal, when the truth of the mystery is that one must be sired by one in embodiment who is the vessel, the Holy Grail of the seed of the Holy Ghost, and the mother being the Holy Grail and the vessel of the divine womb, the Divine Mother. So they go forth to find this child. Now this all comes under the vow of Bodhi. The 5 of the secret ray initiations, the 5 stages of the preliminary, all come under what is called the awakening of the crown chakra. And as we said, this figures as the 12 o'clock line, the very first initiation of the path. So we are on the 3rd of these 5, and it is the test of endurance. This is the period when the inner qualities, the soul qualities, the innate genius that one carries with one, show themselves. They come to the fore, and one can imagine and anticipate what this potential will be. This is the 3rd secret ray. Now, the reason we gave to you our lecture in the SU classroom was so that we could draw a circle and you could use the same diagram for taking notes on each of our lectures. So in this first preliminary stage, the preparatory stage of beloved Merlin, when the innate qualities show themselves, from the point of desire in the heart of Alpha and Omega to be the Bodhisattva, to the preparation on the 5 secret rays, which count for the 12 o'clock line. These 5 secret rays are the ring surrounding the heart chakra, or the I Am Presence, and they show the makeup and the heart quality of the soul and its potential and ability to make it all the way. Because in the diagramming of the clock, generally the 5 secret rays fall on the 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 o'clock lines, we take into consideration the qualities of those lines and their chakras, even though we understand that these are applying to the 12 collectively and come from the heart. We said in this awakening period that it has to do with the crown chakra of Merlin. This does not supplant the basic rule that the 5 secret rays here are the testing of the heart qualities. Now here is the test of endurance of the child Merlin. They found the child, and they brought him, the youthful Merlin, before Vortigern. Standing before the royal magicians, Merlin had nothing but blistering contempt for them. He shows this power of that 9 o'clock line of the Holy Spirit, enduring before the usurpers of his office. They are killers, and they desire to kill him. So we have gone over the purification of conception, the vow of Bodhi, the test of endurance, and we are at the prophecy by a Buddha. Now these 3 stages of the preliminary period have covered the 7 o'clock line, the seat of the soul chakra, the purification of the soul. 8 o'clock line, the chakra of the solar plexus, has to do with the vow of Bodhi, the will to embody the desire. The 9 o'clock line, the test of endurance, the power of reality to endure before the usurpers of his office, the false hierarchy impostors of Merlin, who were the magicians, the royal magicians of Vortigern. And that is that power of the heart. So it's the seat of the soul on the 7, the solar plexus on the 8, the heart chakra on the 9, and the prophecy of the Buddha on the 10 is the 3rd eye chakra. And the prophecy of the Buddha is the power of the presence of Merlin, much in the same way that we hear, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." The pleasure of God in Merlin is his manifestation of the truth in the prophecy, which does come to pass as he speaks. He tells the king that his tower would not stand because there was a pool in the ground beneath it, a fact which his magicians had been too incompetent to discern. On the fourth secret ray, the 10 o'clock line, the initiation is prophecy by a Buddha, the prophecy that this one is going to be a bodhisattva. In this case, it is the boy Merlin who utters prophecy. But this prophecy, of course, comes from the Father, comes from the one who sent him, and therefore his approval on the path is in what he actually says and the truth of what he says. At the bottom of the pool, Merlin said, were 2 hollow stones, and inside the stones were dragons. Vortigern's workmen dug down and found the pool. From it emerged 2 fire-breathing dragons, one red and one white, which began to fight. Again, the perversions of Alpha and Omega and the power of God. Now, Moria's comment about Merlin at this point in our lecture is that Merlin is himself a self-fulfilled prophecy. He was speaking the word, yet God speaking through him was the prophecy by the higher self, or the Buddha, of his victory, proven by the fact that what he said was true. We come to the 11 o'clock line, the 5th secret ray, which is the attainment of a bodhisattva. Here, one practices the vow of Bodhi through vigilance, watchfulness over mind and body, and self-knowledge. This is the line of the throat chakra, the Sagittarius 11 o'clock line, the 5th secret ray. Merlin continues his prophecy. He explained to the astonished Vortigern that the portent of these 2 dragons fighting meant that the British, the red dragon, would be hard-pressed by the Saxons, the white dragon, until the coming of the boar of Cornwall. The boar of Cornwall would be none other than King Arthur, who would trample the Saxons beneath his feet. Merlin went on to deliver a long string of prophecies in obscure symbolic language, and Vortigern was vastly impressed. He could have spoken in the tongues of angels or of Atlantis or the ancient Druid language. Here we find that the young child is self-aware, he has self-knowledge, he is self-confident, that what he says is true, and that his word has power and authority. It shows that he has trust in his being, he has the courage to be, he senses the empowerment by the one sponsoring him, and he does not fear to speak what he hears. He says, "As I hear, so I speak." So what we learn from this 5th secret ray, the power of the throat chakra, is that what we experience and have as attainment, especially of the heart and the 5 rings around the heart, we must have the courage to manifest. So at a certain point, there must come the power of the spoken word to deliver what is within oneself. And until it is spoken with that authority and we have the courage to speak it, it is like that which is internal is not yet born. Just as in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God, and without that Word was not anything made that was made. In your process of self-creation, creating oneself, there comes that moment where you affirm who you are, and by the very implanting of the rod of energy, the rod of authority of your identity, there is gathered against it the anti-power, the anti-word. This leaves you undaunted, and you continue to speak the word, and by the power of that word, you defeat the enemy, or the anti-word. So there comes a point when silence is no longer golden. And you can see, had Merlin as a boy not spoken and challenged these magicians, they would have slain him and taken his blood. And the blood is the power of the word, the power of the light of Christ. And instead, he focused all of the momentum of attainment of the preliminary stage in this spoken word. And I speak of the preliminary stage as all previous lifetimes. And the power of the word actually collapsed their misused serpent fire. And Merlin stood alone, the white magician in the group. So trust and the courage to be is a part of that preliminary stage. You can see we have to kick out indecision, self-pity, shall I do this, shall I do that, because it compromises the rod of power. Now we come to the first period, these 5 holding the position of the 12 o'clock line. Merlin successfully manifests and demonstrates the law of that 12 o'clock line. Now here at the heart of Aquarius on the 1 o'clock line, the first period of the future Bodhisattva, a period preparatory to full Bodhisattvaism. This is the period when the future Bodhisattvas are recruited from among men whose temperament is not yet determined. The stage 1 is the predisposition to compassion, the essential element and the first step in proving the law. Another version of Merlin's life comes from Welsh tradition and was adopted to a large extent by Geoffrey in his later work entitled The Life of Merlin. Here we find that Merlin, driven to grief and madness by the carnage of a certain battle in which he himself took part, flees to the forest of Caledonia and lives as a wild man. In the heart of the forest, he takes shelter under an apple tree and utters prophecies concerning future events in the history of Wales. This is a very important moment in the life of the Bodhisattva because one realizes that whereas previously one may have existed by force, by political maneuvers, by a certain amount of ambition, and even about foxing this one and that one can no longer live by the sword, one can no longer live by the outer uses of power. This preliminary stage in the 5 secret rays has served to heighten the soul sensitivities. Now the 1 o'clock line of Aquarius is the development of soul sensitivity without which one cannot manifest compassion. One realized that one may have had a good cause, but the means was not right, and the energy qualified was not right. The apple tree is the heart's symbol. The apple itself is a grail that contains a cup of elixir of compassion. Now this was Moria's comment to me when I was studying the life of Merlin. He wants you to know that an apple is a heart, a gift from God that is a holy grail that contains the elixir of compassion. So when you drink a glass of apple juice, especially that you freshly squeeze on your juicer, you ought to consecrate it to line 1 of the Bodhisattva and call for the sensitivity of the soul through this gift of the elixir of compassion. When you take an apple juice fast, you are bathing all of your sacred centers and organs lovingly in God's compassion. Stage 2 of the first period, the 2 o'clock line of Pisces under Jesus, aspiration to Bodhi. It is a germinal stage. We are in the etheric quadrant. At this point, Merlin is described as a godly sage who studies the stars and whose prophecies are recorded by 70 secretaries. He must have been talking through all of his chakras. these prophecies became very popular. It seems that Merlin or Saint Germain has always been popular, always beloved. At the beginning of the Renaissance, Merlin was considered throughout Western Christendom to have as much authority as Isaiah or the Sibyl. His prophecies were widely accepted in Britain and France into the 17th century. The Council of Trent in the 16th century even sought to counteract their popularity by putting the prophecies of Merlin on the index of condemned material. One wonders if any mouthpiece of truth can ever, in any form, escape the condemnation of the ecclesiastics. One of his prophecies, repeated throughout Scotland by the friars during clashes with the English in the 14th century, was that after the death of Le Roi Covetou, the people of Scotland and the Britons, by which they mean the Welsh, would rise together and have sovereign power and live in harmony to the end of the world. Another of Merlin's cryptic prophecies, which some say referred to the reign of Henry I of England, was that there would succeed a lion of justice at whose roar the castles of Gaul and the dragon, standards of the island, would tremble, that in his days gold would be extorted from the lily, and the nettle and silver would flow from the hooves of oxen, that those who used curling tongues on the hair would effect various fleeces so that the outward appearance would betray the inner man, that the feet of dogs would be mutilated, the venison have peace, and men lament their punishment, and that the coins of commerce would be divided, and the halfpenny would be round. So the prophecies of Merlin are the further amplification of that state of aspiration to Bodhi. That takes care of the 1 and 2 o'clock lines. We are back to the 3, and as you know, from the 3 to the 9, the mental to the emotional quadrant, the 7 stages of the second period are reviewed. This is the period of the Bodhisattva or future Buddha. Stage 1, the heart, being the examination of the Aries line, the 3 o'clock line, is the joyful, the first fruit, a saint. The disciple is no longer an ordinary man. He enters the supernatural career. Under this stage, we see that Merlin has been called the guiding genius of Arthur's reign. He played an integral part in Arthur's birth and upbringing. Let us listen to how John Steinbeck tells the story in his Acts of King Arthur and his Noble Knights. When Uther Pendragon was King of England, his vassal, the Duke of Cornwall, was reported to have committed acts of war against the land. Then Uther ordered the Duke to attend his court and to bring with him his wife Igraine, who was famed for her wisdom and beauty. When the Duke arrived before the king, the great lords of the council made peace between them, so that the king offered his friendship and his hospitality. Then Uther looked at the lady Igraine and saw that she was as beautiful as he had heard. He loved her and desired her and begged her to lie with him, but Igraine was a faithful wife, and she refused the king. She spoke privately to the Duke, her husband, saying, "I believe that you were not sent for because of transgression. The king has planned to dishonor you through me. Therefore I beg you, my husband, that we may creep away from this danger and ride in the night to our own castle, for the king will not tolerate my refusal." And as she wished, they went away so secretly that neither the king nor his council were aware of their going. When Uther discovered their flight, he was filled with rage. He called the lords together and told them of the Duke's treachery. The noble council, seeing and fearing his anger, advised the king to send messengers ordering the Duke and Igraine to return at once. "For," they said, "if he should refuse your summons, it will be your duty and your right to make war against him and destroy him." And it was so done. The messengers galloped after the Duke and came back with a curt reply that neither his wife nor he would return. Then the enraged Uther sent a second message advising the Duke to defend himself, because within 40 days the king would drag him from his strongest castle. Thus warned, the Duke provisioned and armed his 2 best fortresses. He sent Igraine to the castle of Tintagel on the high cliffs above the sea, while he himself defended Terrible, a thick-walled fort with many gates and secret doors. King Uther gathered an army and marched against the Duke. He pitched his tents about the castle Terrible and laid siege to it. In the assault and fierce defense, many good men were killed, but neither side could gain the advantage until at last Uther fell sick from anger and frustration and from longing for the fair Igraine. Then the noble knight Sir Ulfius went to Uther's tent and asked the nature of his illness. "I will tell you," said the king. "I am sick from anger and from love, and there are no medicines for those." "My lord," Sir Ulfius said, "I shall go in search of Merlin the wizard. That wise and clever man can brew a remedy to make your heart glad." And Sir Ulfius rode out to look for Merlin. Now Merlin was a wise and subtle man with strange and secret powers of prophecy, and those deceptions of the ordinary and the obvious which are called magic. Merlin knew the winding channels of the human mind, and also he was aware that a simple open man is most receptive when he is mystified, and Merlin delighted in mystery. Therefore, as if by chance, the searching knight Sir Ulfius came upon a ragged beggar in his path who asked him whom he sought. The knight was not accustomed to be questioned by such a one, and he did not deign to reply. Then the ragged man laughed and said, "There's no need to tell me. I know. You are looking for Merlin. Look no further. I am Merlin." "You? You are a beggar," said Sir Ulfius. Merlin chuckled at his joke. "I am also Merlin," he said. "And if King Uther will promise me the reward I wish, I shall give him what his heart desires, and the gift I wish will be more to his honor and profit than to mine." Sir Ulfius was wonderstruck, and he said, "If this is true, and if your demand is reasonable, I can promise that you shall have it." "Ride back to the king, then. I will follow you as quickly as I can." Then Sir Ulfius was glad, and he turned about and put his horse to great speed until he came at last to the tent where Uther lay ill, and he told the king he had found Merlin. "Where is he?" the king demanded. "My lord," said Ulfius, "he is afoot. He will come as soon as he can." And at that moment he saw that Merlin was already standing in the entrance of the tent. And Merlin smiled, for he took joy in causing wonder. Uther saw him and welcomed him, and Merlin said brusquely, "Sir, I know every corner of your heart and mind. And if you will swear by your anointed kingship to grant me my wish, you shall have what I know your heart desires." And so great was Uther's eagerness that he swore by the 4 evangelists to keep his promise. Then Merlin said, "Sir, this is my desire. The first time you make love to Igraine, she will conceive a child by you. When that child is born, it must be given to me to do with as I wish. But I do promise that this will be to your honor and to the child's advantage. Do you agree?" "It shall be as you wish," said the king. "Then rise and make yourself ready," Merlin said. "This very night you will lie with Igraine in the castle of Tintagel by the sea." "How can that be?" the king asked. And Merlin said, "By my arts I will cause her to believe that you are the Duke, her husband. Sir Ulfius and I will go with you, but we will wear the appearance of 2 of the Duke's trusted knights. I must warn you, though, when you come to the castle, speak as little as possible or you may be discovered. Say that you are weary and ill and get quickly to bed, and in the morning, mind you do not rise until I come for you. Now make ready, for Tintagel is 10 miles from here."
They prepared themselves and mounted and rode away. But the Duke, from the walls of the castle terrible, saw King Uther ride away from the siege lines, and knowing the king's forces to be leaderless, he waited until nightfall and then attacked in force from the gates of the castle. And in the fight the Duke was killed, a full 3 hours before the king arrived at Tintagel. When Uther and Merlin and Sir Ulfius rode through the starlit darkness toward the sea, the fog moved restlessly over the moors like wispy ghosts in floating clothes. Half-formed mist people crept with them, and the forms of riders grew changeable like figures of cloud. When they came to the guarded gates of Tintagel on its high, sharp rock above the whispering sea, the sentries saluted the recognized forms of the Duke and Sir Brastias and Sir Jordanus, 2 of his trusted men. And in the dim passages of the castle, the Lady Igraine welcomed her husband and dutifully led him to her chamber. Then King Uther lay with Igraine, and that night she conceived a child. This is a most amazing initiation of Merlin, which he gives to King Uther for the birth of Arthur. We find in the power of his gift of prophecy and in the destiny of the birth of that one that even the prophet did not disobey cosmic law. He anticipated the stream of events, saw how they lay, and what was to come to pass was the instrument of the very fulfillment of the prophecy of the death of the Duke and of the marriage of Igraine and Uther. Thus the future preordained came to pass in a cosmic moment and interval of that astrology. And here, where we have the 4 o'clock line, stage 2, the immaculate, the practice of morality, we see that the morality of higher purpose is served in contradiction to the awareness of men in time and space, and even to their customs and tradition. When daylight came, Merlin appeared as he had promised, and in the misty light, Uther kissed the Lady Igraine and hastily departed. The sleepy sentries opened the gates to their supposed lord and his retainers, and the 3 rode away into the mist of morning. And later, when news came to Igraine that her husband was dead, and had been dead when the form of him came to lie with her, she was troubled and filled with sad wonder. But she was alone now and afraid, and she mourned her lord in private, and did not speak of it. Now that the Duke was dead, the true reason for the war was lost, and the king's barons begged him to make peace with Igraine. The king smiled secretly and let himself be persuaded. He asked Sir Ulfius to arrange a meeting, and very soon the lady and the king came together. After their meeting, Igraine and Uther decided to marry. As the time nears for Arthur to be born, Merlin comes to the king and says, "Sir, the time draws near. We must plan for the rearing of your child when it is born." "I remember my promise," said Uther. "It shall be as you advise." Then Merlin said, "I suggest then one of your lords who is a faithful and an honorable man. His name is Sir Ector, and he has lands and castles in many parts of England and Wales. Send for this man to come to you, and if you are satisfied, require of him that he put his own child to nurse with another woman, so that his wife may suckle yours. And when your child is born, as you promised, it must be delivered to me, unchristened and unnamed, and I will take it away secretly to Sir Ector." The practice of morality, the immaculate, is fulfilled as Merlin takes the young child, Arthur, and sees to it that he is brought up in all of the traditions of the learning and teaching of the Druids. He teaches by example. The 4 o'clock line of the Buddha, the imparting of the path by the Buddha to the future Bodhisattva Arthur. When Sir Ector came to Uther, he promised to rear the child, and because of this the king gave him great rewards of lands. And when Queen Igraine came to be delivered, the king commanded the knights and 2 ladies to wrap the child in cloth of gold, and to carry him through a little postern gate and give him to a poor man who would be waiting there. Thus was the child delivered to Merlin, who carried it to Sir Ector, and his wife nursed the baby at her own breast. Then Merlin brought a holy man to christen the child, and it was named Arthur. We come to stage 3 of the second period of the Bodhisattva or future Buddha. On the 5 o'clock line of Gemini, now the initiation of the throat chakra. The previous 4 was the all-seeing eye of God. In the unfoldment of Merlin's career, Uther dies within 2 years of Arthur's birth, and the kingdom is without a ruler for some time. Danger arises from outside enemies as well as from the ambitious lords within the realm. It is a period of interval. Merlin is centered within the God control, holding the balance in the formative years of Arthur. By and by, in the midst of all of this anarchy, Merlin advises the Archbishop of Canterbury to summon all the nobility to London for Christmas, so the Lord might, by a sign, reveal who the rightful king should be. Now this stage 3 is the illuminating, the reflection upon the nature of things. Patience and forbearance are the chief virtues of this stage, waiting for the fullness of time and the fullness of cycles, when all around you the pressures and agitations of these Nephilim, these fallen ones, is to attempt to precipitate prematurely what must not be plucked until it is ripened. Knowing the fullness of time and the right time demands the inner sense of the cosmic astrology of the moment. And so on Christmas Day in London, while all are in church at Mass, a sword appears in a stone in the churchyard. Written in gold letters around the sword are the words, "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king, born of all England." They all came forward, but no one in all the realm but the young Arthur was able to perform the feat. The elaboration of this event comes in the analysis of the life of the Bodhisattva Arthur. Of course, this event never would have occurred had it not been for Merlin. It is Merlin's adeptship in the following of these lines that enables it to take place. And interestingly, it is on Merlin's action on the line of Gemini that the future Chohan, whose position is Gemini on the cosmic clock, removes that sword from the stone. We can come to understand how we are all dependent upon the great causal body and the cosmic clock of the Guru with whom we serve. We come to stage 4, which is on the 6 o'clock line of the second period of the Bodhisattva or future Buddha. Stage 4 is the radiant. It is the cultivation of meditation. In this particular episode, we find Merlin one with the universal energy which is the universal Shakti. He is centered in the very heart of the mother, and by the fire of the mother, he demonstrates his attainment. During Arthur's reign, Merlin is serving as his counselor. He is, in Tennyson's words, the most famous man of all those times, who knew the range of all their arts, had built the king his havens, ships and halls, was also bard and knew the starry heavens. The people called him wizard. All of this, of course, comes out of the flow of the mother light, out of the base chakra, out of the attainment of the hierarchy of Cancer. Cultivation of meditation, exercise of raising the mother light. He is the radiant. He is seen throughout the land as the radiant one. He has the ability to transform himself into any shape or form and to change the appearance of others. He does this at times to help the king and as a diversion for the court as well. Merlin was also known for his feat of moving Stonehenge from Ireland to Salisbury Plain in England. Some legends say he did it by his magical powers alone, and others say that he did it by his engineering skill. Richard Cavendish, in his book King Arthur and the Grail, summarizes the figure of Merlin in the Arthurian romances. Merlin at his height. Like the wild man of the early Merlin legends, he is essentially solitary and a free spirit, answerable to no one, unimpressed by rank and title, careless of convention. He comes into the story always from outside, suddenly appearing out of the blue to give advice or perform some piece of magic, and then vanishing again. Wherever his home is, it is not at Camelot, but somewhere beyond the boundary of the everyday human world. There is apparently a limit to the amount of human company he can tolerate, and in the end he is cut off from human society altogether. He seems ageless, and it is not certain that he has ever died. We come to stage 5 of the future Buddha, the invincible. It is the cultivation of the noble truths by the fiery power of Leo on the 7 o'clock line. Sir Thomas Malory, in Le Morte d'Arthur, tells of Merlin's role as the Camelot record keeper following one great battle. Merlin took his leave of Arthur and of the 2 kings for to go and see his master Blaise, that dwelt in Northumberland, and so he departed and came to his master, that was passing glad of his coming. And there he told how Arthur and the 2 kings had sped at the great battle, and how it was ended, and told the names of every king and knight of worship that was there. And so Blaise wrote the battle, word by word, as Merlin told him how it began, and by whom and in likeness how it was ended, and who had the worse. All the battles that were done in Arthur's days, Merlin told his master Blaise to write. Also he told him to write all the battles that every worthy knight did of Arthur's court. Now this is the writing down of the teaching. It's the cultivation of the noble truths. The Camelot record keeper. It is a 7 o'clock initiation of the keeper of the scrolls. And it is the violet flame detail. Why do we keep detailed records? This was Moria's instruction to me in my preparation of this lecture. He said, you must have detailed records in order to have detailed transmutation. So the future Chohan of the 7th ray meticulously sees to it that the one who is called his master Blaise, spelled B-L-E-I-S-E, Blaise, writes down every single event of Arthur and his knights. Why? He doesn't necessarily tell Blaise, but he will take that record and pass it through the sacred fire and consume the lesser and preserve the greater, and thereby exalt the future bodhisattvas. A most amazing record, a most amazing understanding when we see it in the light of the path. The requirement of transmutation, the requirement for Saint Germain on the 7th ray is transmutation as he cultivates the noble truths. Noble truths are applied to life. Life is action. Life is the eightfold path. Life must have the violet flame for the perfecting of the eightfold path. Now this is such a powerful release of Merlin's life that at this particular segment we would like to give some violet flame decrees once again so that you can take these steps and stages, review your notes as you decree, and put into the flame what you can pick up and glean of your own life stream to cast it into the violet flame river of life for transmutation in this moment of dispensation from Merlin's causal body. Let us take 70.11 so you can give the decree at the same time you can visualize the casting into the flame of that substance.
I am the being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity and desires. I am a being of I am the purity
Now we will take number 70, and then take 70.11, the preamble. And when you start giving the verse over and over again, you can start your meditation for the consuming of records. Now all of this is a part of our effort to clear the way so that our causal bodies might hold the balance against the darkness of the dark cycle. Let us rejoice in the exercise together.
I am the one, I am accountable, I am Saint Germain in embodiment.
See here my hands, my heart, these belong to Saint Germain. Come into my temple.
We're taking up stage 6 of the second period, the Bodhisattva or future Buddha. This is the turned toward the cultivation of dependent origination. The initiate has turned his full attention toward God, thus showing the elimination of distraction. It is the 8 o'clock line, stage 6. The solar plexus, showing that one cannot put one's full attention on God if one has not some mastery in the solar plexus. Out of the desiring of God, Merlin stands in the astral quadrant, the astral quagmire, and he brings forth the lotus, brings forth the lotus flower out of the astral plane. He reveals the mysteries of the Holy Grail. Merlin is, in fact, portrayed as the prophet of the Holy Grail. In some legends, he advised Uther Pendragon to construct the round table of knightly fellowship. After Uther's death and before the new king is revealed, the knights of Uther's round table go to serve Guinevere's father and take the table with them. Guinevere then brings the round table to Camelot as her dowry when she marries King Arthur. Merlin was appointed by Arthur to choose the knights for the table, and he predicts the quest for the Holy Grail and reveals its mystery. Richard Cavendish summarizes Robert de Boron's characterization of Merlin. Merlin inspires and prompts the whole of Arthurian knighthood, its highest ideals and the quest of the Grail. It is made clear that Merlin does not cause the events which are to occur, but it is through him that the secret forces of destiny penetrate the human world. This can only occur when the initiate, who is that instrument, has the full attention on God, leaving open the course of the river of life, the crystal cord, 24 hours a day open to be that instrument for the forces of destiny, the brotherhood. Through the heart of Merlin is revealed the mind of God by pure desire on the 8 o'clock line. The author points out it is not the Christian church, as one might expect, which carries out this task, but the great enchanter. The implication is that the quest of the Grail is something older, stranger, and more profound than the church can contain. At least, if the Roman Church contains it, it has never told us. We come to the 9 o'clock line, stage 7 of the second period, the far-going. Full intelligence of the Bodhisattva while still subject to passions. Here we observe the interaction of the Guru and the Chela, the one becoming the Buddha, helping the one who is in the level of the Bodhisattva. At various times, Merlin appears to Arthur to help him plan a battle, to teach him a lesson, or to save him from some danger. One such episode was during the long and bloody battle fought by Arthur and his knights against the 11 kings who would not accept Arthur as king. Though Arthur and his men fought valiantly, so did his opponents. These 11 kings were one series of fallen ones, Nephilim gods, who would not accept the Christ on the throne. Arthur and his knights did battle with another set of Nephilim kings, 12 in number. This shows that one has to slay the dweller on the threshold of every gate to the city if one would enter the city, take it by light, and be seated on the throne of the threefold flame of Alpha and Omega in the center. This is John Steinbeck's version of this fight. The deadly fight went on. King Arthur saw that he could not defeat his enemies. He raged as crazily as a wounded lion, ranging back and forth against any who stood against him, so that men were filled with wonder at him, striking to left and right with his sword. He killed 20 knights, and he wounded King Lot on the shoulder so severely that he had to leave the field. King Arthur was fearful to see. His shield was covered with blood, so that his device could not be recognized. The slaughter went on until at last the King Arthur called a halt, and with difficulty the 3 kings forced their men to disengage with the enemy and to withdraw into the forest, and then across a little river where the men fell down and slept in the grass, for they had had no rest for 2 days and a night. And on the bloody battlefield the 11 northern lords and their men gathered together in sadness and misery. They had not lost, but neither had they won. King Arthur marveled at the toughness of the northern knights, and he too was angry, because he also had neither lost nor won. After their rest, they once again took up the battle, which became more and more bloody. Now Merlin came riding in on a great black horse, and he cried to King Arthur, "Will you never stop? Haven't you done enough? Out of 70,000 who began the battle, only 15,000 are left alive. It is time to call a halt to the slaughter, or God will be angry with you." And Merlin continued, "Those rebellious lords have sworn never to leave the field alive. And when men are so disposed, they can take many with them to their deaths. You cannot defeat them now. You can only kill them to your loss. Therefore, my lord, retire from the field as quickly as you can, and let your men rest. Reward your knights with gold and silver, for they have deserved it. There are no riches too dear for them. Never have so few knights done more in honor and bravery against a greater enemy. Today your knights have matched themselves against the best fighters in the world. Here Merlin teaches his Chela, the Buddha's non-attachment to the fruit of action, greater love for the bodhisattvas than the desire to kill the enemy. So he delivers Arthur from his attachment, from his very involvement with the forces, with the outer ring of experience. And in this case, the Guru absorbs the passions of his Chela. We observe then that when one has the mastery of the stage, any particular stage, if there are two or three together, the one highest on the rung of the ladder of attainment takes the test on behalf of those disciples who are under him. By the spoken word and by the power of love, this test of reality and unreality becomes clear on the Libra line through the Holy Spirit's enlightenment by Merlin. We have completed then the 7 stages of the second period from the 3 to the 9 o'clock line. We enter the third period, and you should give the third period the title of the Celestial Bodhisattva. There are 3 stages in this period which fall on the 10, 11, and 12 o'clock line. Here the consciousness of the Bodhisattva becomes more etheric. He is functioning truly at the etheric level, yet he is still physical. Stage 8 is the steadfast or immovable, and the test is the 10 o'clock line of Scorpio, its illusion, its darkness, its misuse of the water element of the mother.